Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay. So yes, good point. Um, so okay. So we should be seeing my screen. I'm not gonna try sharing to Acrobat as its own window because got into trouble yesterday. So I'm just going to share the screen and work with it from here. Okay, so this is really the second of my talks um, on accessibility, and I want to reproduce kind of what we got to at the beginning of the first talk, where I talked about these three, six, seven different, yes, 6 different aspects of what constitutes accessibility, or what some of the things that contribute to a document being accessible. And we'll just recap on a few things and note that we have packages which handle this kind of thing. Okay, so for the auto-generated CMaps, my PDFX package, or the package that started off with Radhakrishnan and Hunter Tan, um, which I now control, handles auto-generated CMaps, at least with PDF tech, right? And that basically consists of lists of glyph names and mappings into Unicode. Okay, and there are several files that do that. Accents after base with macros. Okay, so this is when you do something like /acute a and as a LaTeX command, and what happens with PDFX package loaded is that it actually places the A first and puts the acute accent afterwards. But of course, that's of no use FUA trying to make documents that are compatible with PDF UA. So what that means is that if you're trying to make fully tagged documents according to PDF standards, you have to turn on and off making spaces and not making spaces. And that all has to be controlled in macros. And it's very, very complicated. And as Frank would say, that it is not robust, or Ulrika would say that's not very robust, which is kind of true. But if you've got it all worked out properly, then it can be made to work. And that's partly what happens. And this kind of thing is all throughout my tPDF package, which is what I use for making tagged PDF documents. And we'll see examples of that. Okay. Soft semantics. So this is now structure tagging of headings, lists, tabular content, and much, much more. Okay, again, this is what happens in my tPDF package when you're using it to its full ability. Okay. And alternative text for figures and formulas. Well, okay, handled by the tPDF package, provided, well, this is one of the cases where the authors may need to provide extra information for alternative text. For formulas, it will automatically put in the LaTeX source as alternative text for formulas, unless you override it with something provided directly from the user. And for tables, there's an automatic thing that's added for some tables, but again, you might want to override that yourself. And the ability to both put it in and override is all handled within the tPDF package. Okay, metadata, as we talked about, certainly for the window titles and all kinds of other metadata, that's all handled by the PDF package. All kinds of other metadata, XMP metadata is the way to go. It allows you to do an awful lot more than just the author, subject, and keywords that you can do directly in PDF. The PDF specifications now deprecate using the simple PDF info author, title, and keywords in favor of putting everything into XMP metadata, right? So all of those packages that have been running for many years, doing it the old way, they need to be updated to using XMP metadata. And I believe that there's a HyperXMP package which helps to do that, but the PDFX package already does it, and gives you much greater control and putting in more different kinds of metadata. But of course it gets complicated. There's more things that you need to know how to do. Well, if you want to do more complicated things, it gives you a way to do that, but you need to learn how to do that if that's what you actually want. Okay, and then hard semantics. Well, all of these things that we put in all of our documents, they're all aspects of hard semantics, and they're all mostly covered by the TPDF package, but of course everybody writes their own packages, and each of those packages we need to look at and see how it fits into the standard structures that we already know about, and there may have to be some extra coding written for any single given package. And basically every document I come across where I want to do proper tag PDF, it's going to be using some packages that I haven't seen before, and so it means that I have a lot of extra work to do. But anyway, that's the nature of the beast as it is at present. Okay. Okay, our aim is to produce documents conforming to published standards. So in particular PDFA stroke 2A, or maybe even 3A, depending upon whether you've got associated files in there or not. Haven't fully developed that aspect yet, but certainly PDFA 2As is the format that I mostly use, as well as PDF UA, which of course is the one that all the US government agencies are needing to use. They have ADA, or the American Disabilities Act, and they have to conform to that, and that's specifying to be using PDF UA if you're going to be using PDF at all. Okay, and then of course the Matterhorn protocol is all about what kinds of things you need to be doing with your tagging of PDF, and of course Acrobat Pro provides tests, and we can see some of those in action. Okay, and that's the basic guts of what the TPDF package is designed for, to handle all of this kind of hard semantics as well as the softer stuff that's been mentioned earlier. Okay, so most of the rest of this talk will be about that, about the hard semantics, and, well, you can even make author definable hard semantics. Okay, so I haven't really talked about that much in previous talks, but that's going to be, I'll give you some examples of that kind of thing in this talk today. Okay, so that's basically where we're going, and we're going to learn a fair bit about what the TPDF package can do, basically through examples. Okay. And okay, so it's all about what extra things are authors going to need to do to help make nicely tagged PDFs. Okay, so let's talk about the whole concept behind that, right? Tagging a PDF document is not something that you expect authors to be able to do. It really isn't. And most of them wouldn't even want to, right? Scientists, if they want, they need to do their own work. They're paid to do experiments and collect data, and then of course they have to write it down, and in order for it to get published, and hopefully they're using LaTeX, but not all of them do, of course. And of course the scientist wants to do a large part of the preparation writing up their work, because they need to guarantee that the data is put in correctly and it's accurate, and what's said about it is actually correct, right? They don't want to hand everything over to somebody else to do, but a certain amount of stuff they do want to hand over to do. And so generally they don't want to be involved with, well, they don't want to be involved with the ins and outs of the document format. They just want to simply get their information out there. But of course they understand that there are some formats are better than others for representing their work. That's fine. But mostly they don't want to. And it's because that's the editor's job. It's the editor's job to make all of this, to handle how the information is presented. Their job is mainly what the information is. But of course there will be some authors that do want to know how to do this kind of stuff and what it's for. Okay? Because it's really quite a very interesting scientific kind of thinking behind it all. Okay? But there are some things that document authors really should be doing better than what they currently do. Okay? And with the intention of being able to make the process of the extra editing that may be required and whatever processing may be required in order to meet standards, okay, there are some things that authors should be doing better. And so I'm going to give some examples of that. Okay, so basically, right, providing the alternative text for the figures and their tables. Right? You don't want the editor shouldn't have to make up the alternative text for those things. The scientists will want to provide that. It's an extra piece of information that's about the work that they're doing in some sense. So they're the ones that really ought to be providing it. And of course the editor can then streamline it, make it better, make it a little bit more palatable than what the author might initially provide. Okay. Hiding physical markup in user-defined macros. Okay, we'll see examples of that. So people may disagree with that this should be being done. I'm hopefully going to convince you that this is something that you should be doing. Hiding the physical markup. Okay. If you're going to do that, we want consistent naming so that the same kinds of things are being, well, you have to avoid, if you're going to be defining your own macros, you don't want to have name clashes with other people's defined macros. Okay, and this is very important when you have multiple authors. All right, so you need a consistent naming scheme for the kind of macros that you're going to define. Okay, and we'll see a little bit about that in examples. Okay, and then this is a very important one. Identify what are the significant semantic elements that occur within the document that you're creating, and so you want to identify those by user-defined macros. That's one way, or environments for larger portions of information. Then it may be environments that you're using rather than individual macros. Okay. Okay, so now let's move on and have a look to see this kind of thing in real-world example settings. And well, okay, so let's go on. Okay, so I've provided a document as the preprint, and this is a link to it. Okay, and you see it's got the same titles, tagging with LaTeX, author considerations. Okay, this document was based upon, well, it's in a sense it's more suited to the talk that I gave last year, but of course it hadn't been written at that stage. And what it's doing is that it's presenting a lot of the ideas that were used in order to do the tagging in the document for last year, and it discusses some of the things that I've just talked about in generalities, some of the ideas. We'll get back, we'll have a little look at this in a bit more detail. Let's fill out this slide first. Okay, so it contains descriptions of tagging, advice to authors on how to make the tagging process easier to achieve. Okay, this is not, following the advice that's given here is not going to give you a tagged PDF document itself, but what it will do is that if you've got the extra TPDF features available, then it makes using them an awful lot easier, and so a lot easier to create that tagged PDF document. Okay. And this one, a document that we all should have seen. Anyone who is a speaker here should have seen this PDF document, or at least maybe the web page for it. In fact, that was built as a fully tagged PDF. So we'll have a little look at that, And of course, because it's information you've already seen, you're not interested in the information, you should only be interested in the tagging. So that will kind of, that's the reason why I've included that. Now I think that's, okay, so we're going to examine that, and this notion of hard semantics is used all throughout here. Okay. And of course the important thing is that it validates. It validates for PDF A to stroke 2A and for PDF UA. Okay, so we'll have a look at that. Okay, so first of all, let's go and have a little look at this one. So this should now bring us through to the document. And if we look at the bookmarks, you can see the kinds of names for the sections. Okay, tagging commands for special content, LaTeX environments indicating structure. Okay, basically this says semantics. This says semantics. If you know what semantics are, then that's basically what these are saying. So this is turning the idea of semantics into just more plain English, tagging commands because there's special content, special meaning attached to the content. The content means something other than just what the words say. That's what semantics is. Okay. LaTeX environments indicating structure. Well, structure is semantics. It's how do you, there's meaning in something other than just the content. That's what semantics is. Okay. And then other words that are familiar from talk I gave yesterday and from what we've just been through on the slides. Okay, so let's have a look at this section 2 here, tagging commands for special content. Okay, in that particular document, in fact I've got that here, so why don't I just bring it up. Here we go. Right, we're referring to this section just here, just a paragraph, but the paragraph has interesting structure involved, right? And you see that some of the text is written in italics, text IT. In the original version of this document, before I tagged it for tag PDF, the source was just let's go, where is it? The source code was just saying text IT, Organic Act of 1916. Well, that's all fine, because for someone who can read it and can see that it's in italics will say, oh, okay, something special. It's in italics, it must be something special. But the author knows it's something special, and the author knows what is special about it. It's the name of an act of Parliament or an act of Congress. So why not say that? Why not say it's an act of Congress? And so that's what you have here in the tagging. The tagging here is, we've tagged it Congress Act. We've called it an act of Congress. Which act of Congress? The text of Organic Act of 1916. So that's that block there. Okay, I should be able to just get that separately. Yeah. So there it is, right? So that's what tagging does for you. So it's not just the form or the way in which you want the text to be put into the document, it's also what does the text actually mean? What is the extra information above and beyond what the words say? The fact that it's an act of Congress. And that's what should be going into your document, especially for somebody who can't see the fact that it's set in italics. Right? There's nothing over here to say that that has to be set in italics, but there is something over here to say what that information is and why it's special and why it needs to be tagged by itself. Okay, and then of course that this particular paragraph has quite a few of those. Okay, so this is what I mean by hard tagging, and also user-defined tagging. Right, the user knows what this information is all about. He should be putting that information, the knowledge of that information, into the document so that people can see that and read it, and especially if they've got this such a tagged view, then they can get that information out using those hints. Okay. Okay, so we don't need that. Let's move that one out of the way. Okay, so let's go back to the talk. Okay, so that's the idea that we need here with the hard semantics and defined by the user, particular to the document itself and the kind of information that you're trying to convey within that document. Okay, let's turn to this one now, the same kind, and look at the same kind of things. Okay, look at that from a tag. Oh, that's the wrong version. Oh, okay, sorry. Let's get the right version. Sorry about that. I've hooked up to the wrong thing. Okay, online advice. Online advice. Let's try, see if that's the right one. Oh, it's in a wrong form. Okay. Okay, I know why it's in that wrong form. Okay, let's take it as this one. Okay, that one's definitely, yeah. Okay, that's properly tagged. There we go. Okay. Okay, sorry about that little glitch. Later we may see why that glitch actually happened. Okay, so here's this document. Most of you have seen it before, but you probably haven't seen it from this point of view. Okay, so we have top matter, we have a title, we have the author, we have the date. Okay, so you see how the text is tagged, and it's given over in the tags. We have a string which tells you what kind of information it is. So that's semantics. And if you like, this is examples of what I was calling heavy semantics. Okay, Paolo did the original text for this and put the information together. I did the tagging, and Carl Berry had a contribution as well because we needed to get this into HTML pages. Okay, we have a section here which is called My Doc Start. How did that happen? How do you get something like that? Well, obviously user-defined semantics. It's an example of user-defined semantics. And in a moment we'll have a look at the actual text source and see how that's achieved. But there's various things in here. So even the TUG logo is tagged. Okay. My TOC, my table of contents, right? There's no heading to say it's a table of contents, but when you look at it, obviously that's what it is. And of course, each of these things is in fact the double tagging here. It's actually a hyperlink. It's a hyperlink down to the section where that actually happens. Okay. And that's all happening inside the table of contents. Okay. Let's move on a bit. Okay, so I've got some paragraphs, some introductory paragraphs. Okay, and then we start to get into the actual sections. Okay, so let's bring that up a bit. Okay, and even here we have a word in italics. Okay, and how was that achieved? Well, it's emphasized, right? So the sound is the most important thing in the online lecture. Okay, and okay, LaTeX has a /emph, EMPH command, and that's what was used here. We did not use /textit. Textit lets you put things in italics, but it doesn't tell you why you're putting them in italics. /emph, the name of the macro, says you want to emphasize this, and the way the emphasis is expressed is to put them in italics. But the putting in italics is actually subsidiary to the fact that you're wanting to emphasize. Okay, here we go. There's a few more like that. There's the bad to good being emphasized, same kind of same kind of thing. But then now, okay, so in our list of things, and there's, okay. So this is actually, because of the requirement for two-column layout here, it's actually been broken up into two different lists. So that's not exactly ideal. A single list might have been better, and perhaps I could have achieved that with a two-column environment or something, multi-cols for two columns. I chose not to do that because it gets a little bit icky, and so instead I broke it up into two different lists. Okay. But okay, so let's have a look at one of those list items. So this TRS. Okay. So there's a label for the list item, so it's item number 4. It's tagged as its own label, and then the body of the item is tagged, oh, that's interesting, SW format. What does that mean? Okay, SW is meant to mean software, and software format. The TRS is describing some kind of protocol or some kind of format for, well, it's actually to do with the pins on the microphone jack, okay, which have to satisfy a certain standard or format or whatever, called TRS. And so we've semantically tagged it as SW format, but the words occurring are just TRS. Okay. Okay, so that's probably a good place to actually move across and have a look at the text source for this. So let's, okay, so that's not the one I want. That's earlier version of tagging this. I want online advice. Okay, so the fact that it says later is not relevant. Okay, so let's, okay, so here we go. There's the, down the bottom half there. Okay, we'll come back and look at the top stuff later. Right, here's where we've set up that myTalk environment for the table of contents at the beginning. I've used a compact item as a list from the Paralist package. I think that's David Carlisle's or something, isn't it? Okay, and each item is a uses, well, it's a hyperlink. So using hyperref from to a label with anchor text, okay, and that sets up those hyperlinks. Okay. Yeah, so here's the microphones with the label mics. Okay, so that's the target of this one that I've highlighted. Okay, and that sets up the hyperlinks. Okay, here's the amp sound and so on. And then here's where we get down into the into those lists. Okay, so what I did was put two mini pages together and put half in one mini page and then the other half in another mini page next to it, and all the items. But look at how the items are specified. Okay, so Bluetooth, it's /Bluetooth. TRS, it's /TRS. TRRS, XLR, USB-C, and USB. Okay. I mean, this is a nice, clean way to define something technical. The point is the name Bluetooth means something more than what the word Bluetooth means. Bluetooth means you've got a Bluetooth. No, it doesn't. Bluetooth means it's some kind of software protocol for conveying information through wireless. And that's an awful lot more, that's a much more complicated concept than what the word Bluetooth itself means. Okay, so you should mark it with a macro. You should have a macro for that, and that macro then will get expanded into how you want to have that information put into the document. Okay, it's called separation of form and content. Well, no, okay, that's not quite right. It's just it's defining an entity. So in XML parlance, you're defining an entity, and then what you are using an entity. Okay, so you're referencing an entity, and somewhere else you define what that entity is. Okay, in tech and LaTeX parlance, you're defining a macro. Okay, but how does that macro work? So how is that macro actually defined? And so that's where we want to come back to something up here in the preamble. And here's where a whole lot of them are defined. Okay. So where's Bluetooth? Let's find Bluetooth. Here's Bluetooth. Okay. Here's Bluetooth. Okay. Bluetooth is defined as an SW format object. And it's going to use the text of the word Bluetooth, and that's what you see in the document. You see the word Bluetooth. Where is it? Oh, okay. Why have we not got the right window underneath? Okay, so this is probably the one I want. Yeah. Okay, so there we go. There's the word Bluetooth. Okay, that doesn't look like the, yeah. Okay, that's not the tag version. Okay, so this is in TextShop, right? So this is TextShop looking at that document, whereas before we were in Acrobat looking at the document. Okay, so here's the text source in TextShop, so I can put those two windows together easily. It's not so easy to organize to have the Acrobat window next to the text source window. It can be done, of course, but let's not muck around with that. Okay, so you see all of these: Zoom, YouTube, OBS, PowerPoint, Keypoint, Keynote, Qt Player, MS Office. Right? Make macros for them, and then when you use them in your document source, well, first of all, the first advantage of that is that it makes the document source so much easier to read and understand, right? There aren't any of those formatting commands that I want to make this text boldface or text italic or whatever. It's just the name of the information. You see it there. It's preceded by a black backslash, which means, yes, okay, there's something special about it. And it's done through a macro, but you can just read the information out of it, right? You don't have to know what those macros are doing, and you can see how they relate to what you actually see in the document itself. Okay. Okay, so now what we do want to understand is, well, what is this SW format, right? So that we come back a bit, and we can find it. Here's the SW format. Okay, all it does is that it takes its parameter and it sets it in text SF of that parameter. Okay, so that's what it does, and that's just ordinary LaTeX. That's ordinary LaTeX, and so you expect to see this result. And there's nothing here about tagging. Okay, why is there nothing here about tagging? Okay. Well, the reason there's nothing in here in this definition about tagging is that whenever I do a tagged document, I like to be able to both do it tagged and untagged. So if we come back up to here we define a Boolean, and it's called if no tagging. Okay, and then you see we've actually got something to say, well, what if I do want tagging? So no tagging true. Well, most of the time I do want tagging. So if no tagging, when a Boolean is created, it's created as with the value false. So if no tagging is false, that means you want tagging. If I want to do it without tagging, all I have to do is delete the comment character, and then I can process the document with no tagging. And why don't we just do that? Let's process it with no tagging. And then we get that. Okay. What if I process it with tagging? Just put that in and do tagging, and okay. The document looks the same. But then there's an awful lot more stuff written here in the log file. And in fact, here's this. Right? Here's this ID tree summary. What is this saying? It's saying we have 57 instances of paragraph tagging. We have 2 instances of text IT. We have 22 instances of emphasis. We have article, one art, one div, 3 top, 3 elements for the top matter. One H1 structure element. We have the document has to, the tagging of the document has to start somewhere. There are 13 figures. One using figure, one using my talk, one using a table of contents, 11 table of contents items, and all the way down. You can see all of the structure here that's been used. If you count up what the total number of structure elements here, you're getting into the hundreds. Okay, there's a couple of 70s there and an 80. So there's more than 300 structure elements that have gone into this document. And this is giving you a list of them. Okay, I happen to be running in a form that's actually quite verbose. There's all of these extra elements. Okay, well, okay, so let's, before having a better look at that, let's go further down, see what else is here. Okay, here's the metadata. Here's how the metadata is specified. Okay, setting up the width and size of the pages and the margins, all that kind of stuff. We'll have to do that at some point. So the PDFX package is loaded, okay, with different options, including the options for the standards that we're wanting to support. But it's this block here that I'm particularly interested in. This is where the package for tagging is loaded. And it's controlled by that Boolean, that if no tagging. Right? If we're not tagging, then we just load it with the option don't use tags. No tags, don't use tags. Okay? And there's alternative extra options that one might use for whatever reason. Okay? Here, if you are using tagging, so if the Boolean is false, so you are using tagging, then, okay, I could have just simply had this one, which if we do that and trace it, then, okay, you get a few extra messages, but you don't get all of that information at the end about the objects that have been used, and you don't get a lot of that other stuff. Okay, there are some messages here that are still part of the package that they may, at some point I may suppress those and leave them to only when you're asking for extra information. And that's what the trace struct does. The trace struct option is actually tracing structure. So let's do that again to see what we get. And let's have a look at, let's go back a bit. Okay. Look at all these extra lines. Okay. We can go a fair way back. Okay. What this is doing is that it's tracing through how the structure is being built up and recorded and used. Okay, so these numbers are actually the PDF object reference numbers inside the PDF. And each time you do something new, you allocate a PDF object, it has a reference number, and if it's a structure element, then it gets included in such a listing. So here we've got an H1 for the title. This is saying, okay, we brought in some text, and then we finished the text, and at that point we then, well, the next point we closed the structure for that title, and so the number 40 gets popped off, and we just get what was left, the 37, the 35, and the 32. Okay. And then for the author, the next piece of metadata is the author. It comes in, it needs a new object number. It's object number 41. The text is happening at that point, inserting the text for the author, and then it gets popped off, and we're back to the 37, 35, 32, same as before. Similarly for the date, and so on. And then once we've finished all of that structured text in the top matter, then we don't need 37 anymore, so it gets popped off, and that happened. The structure was closed. That means, so that's why the 37 gets lost. It gets popped off, and it's happening in a macro that has the word end top matter as part of its name. Okay, and so we get, and that just happens throughout the whole document, right? And you can see that the depth of the tagging can get quite deep. In fact, well, links, hyperlinks, items. We're inside an item list. Right, the lists are labeled with names. List 1, item 2, list 1, item 3, and so on. Okay, and this is all within the table of contents part at the beginning. And you see how the structure, extra structure is being defined. When you don't need it anymore, it's getting popped off, and it's just keeping track of what is the status of the structure tree all throughout the document. Okay, and it goes. You can see all of this. Okay, and of course I remind you these are all the actual PDF object numbers. Okay, because PDF text builds the objects itself, and so it can do that. For something like LaTeX, they wouldn't be the actual object numbers, but they would be a reference which ends up being specifying a unique object number, and so the same numbers can be used, that just their interpretation is just a little bit different. Okay, and you go through the whole document in this way, and it all just happens. Okay, so that's giving you an idea of what's going on there with this, and you can see we've seen the concept now. Oh, okay, so yes, I need one more thing. We haven't yet seen how do we get these software applications, software menu items, software operating systems, software file extensions, etc. How do we get those tagged? Okay, so that happens a bit further down. That happens here. Where does it start? Okay, so there should be yeah, here we go. Here's another use of the if no tagging. That's what we want. Okay, we make use of a macro called backmatter. Well, we need it here. When we're tagging, we need it. We need to close the final thing at the end. An extra level of structure needs to be closed at some point, okay, before doing the final stuff. But if you're not tagging, you don't need that. It doesn't do anything, so you just make it relax. Okay, but if you are tagging, then you need that. And then we also here's where we've redefined our my TOC environment to make it a tagging version rather than a non-tagging version. There's more stuff there, and okay, there's even more stuff here. Okay, so the actual tagging stuff, it gets pulled in from a different file. It gets pulled in from the tagging stuff for these guys gets pulled in from a different file, and what actually happens is that although we define these here to give us the visual view of how that information is going to be put in that other file, these all get redefined to use this for the tagging view, but also to add in the extra tagging structure. Okay, and the idea behind all of that is described back in the preprint. Okay, the preprint which gives the author advice. It tells you what kinds of things are happening, why it's a good thing to be doing this, and gives you an idea of how that's done. So all these things do get redefined, they get redefined in their own little extra file called input tpdf-tug.tech, and I might be able to show that to you. I think I've got that set up. Yeah, here we go. tpdf. It's one of these files, tpdf-tug.tech. I don't see it. Oh, okay, maybe that one isn't. Yeah, maybe that's not there. Maybe it's in the same directory. But anyway, so this is letting you have a look into the guts of how the tpdf package actually works, and how, right, so this one is supporting the paralist package. Okay, so the various environments that are defined in the paralist package how their tagging is supported, and there's a couple of hundred lines of coding in there for that. A few hundred lines, 400 lines, yeah, 400 lines. ACM for Association of Computer Machinery, so stuff that we did early on for ACM articles, needs a revision. Stuff for TXI, which will be in the next part of the talk that I give with Tom Price. Here's some stuff for Tom Price for his thing. Here's the basic tpdf.sty package, which is really just a skeleton. It's not a full package. It's a skeleton of a package, and it has options for if you're going to do tagging or not do tagging. If you're not doing tagging, then a whole lot of things just get relaxed and do nothing. Okay, if you are, so a lot of these things down here, see a lot of commands are defined to do absolutely nothing. Read their arguments but don't do anything with them. Okay, because they're things that are only needed when you are doing tagging. Okay, and the inside here is, okay, so you've got this conditional again, tpdf at no tags. Okay, a lot of things get delayed to begin document. That's a very standard programming technique, which I've seen mentioned in a couple of people's papers for talks these last few days. Yeah, more things for no tags and for tags. It's all been worked out, right? So here are the basic package options. Okay, debugging, suppress error messages, don't do tagging, show structure, trace output. That one's an important one. We might have a look at that in more detail. There's lots of things involved, masses and masses, and you can see all these different files. All up, there must be getting close to 20,000 lines of coding in here. Okay, a lot of that coding is repetitive. That's true. So it could be reduced in size, but the thing is, what's the point? Why? There's no real point in reducing it in size at this stage. You want to make it easy to be able to find if something's not working properly. You want to be able to find the place where it's not working, and it may be that there's some important aspect that we've missed out on, and so let's do that. So there's a lot of chat messages here. Yeah, okay, so there's a lot of interesting things to look back on. Okay, so given that, I think I want to go back to, let's go back to the main document, accessibility talks. Okay, so I've given you an idea of some of the things that are happening in here. There's plenty more, but there's so many more things that I don't actually want to make the decision about what we look at next. Okay, so here's some of the things that are important here. How do we know that the tagged version of the LaTeX produced PDF looks visually identical to when it's processed without tagging? Well, we have to solve that problem, and we have a solution for that. And I could show you that as a demonstration. Okay, page breaking. How do we see about how page breaking works? Hyperlinking, right? We've seen examples of hyperlinks, and there's a new concept which HyperF doesn't yet support. It's called structure destinations within PDF, and these have been brought in with PDF 2.0. But they actually work with earlier versions. So you can use structure destinations, and in fact, well, okay, we can have a look at those if someone wants to have a look at those. Exporting to XML and HTML. That's pretty important. I think that's one we should have a look at. Beamer slides. I was thinking a lot about Beamer slides this morning and how to turn my lectures, my unit lectures in my paid work which is all done through Beamer slides. And in fact, this is a Beamer document, of course. How can we tag within Beamer slides? Okay, so that's interesting. There's many other things that could be done. Okay, so what I want to do next is bring up another poll. Okay, so we've probably only got about 7 or 8 minutes left. You tell me which of these things you would like me to have a look at. Which of them? All of them. Yeah, fine. Wow. Okay, so I'll give you another 20-30 seconds and then we can have a look. Okay. There's a lot of equality there. All right, okay, that's probably enough time. End the poll and share the results. Okay, so the winners are export to XML and HTML. All of them. I'm afraid we probably can't do all of them. And then a few for hyperlinking and tagging with page breaking. And no one's interested in fidelity between comparing the tagged and non-tagged versions. Oh, well. Okay, I suppose that's more of a historical one than anything. So, okay, so what do we do? Export to XML and HTML. Okay, let's do that one first. Okay, so what do we need? We need to... Right, and there was a question in the question and answers. Yeah, okay. Okay, I will answer that one. Okay, export to XML and HTML. Okay, so we want to look at the fully tagged document here. Okay, right. Acrobat Pro, under File, Export to. Okay, we can do HTML web page. Let's do XML first. Export to XML. Okay, save that XML file. Save the XML file. Okay, replace with one that was already there. And then wait for a little while and it'll be opened up in another application. Okay, actually Apple's Xcode opens up the XML document and come on, come. Should be, yeah, here we go. Okay. So here's our nice XML document. And if we'd opened this up in an appropriate web browser, it should tell us that it's fully well formed, no errors. At least it was last time I looked. And I hope I haven't done anything since that's broken anything. But first of all, here's the XMP metadata. Okay, the Adobe XMP metadata. Okay, if you know how to read this kind of stuff, it tells you about all the namespaces that tags are coming out of, what they're attached to. Okay, so the PDF metadata, the producer was PDF Tech. The keywords that we provided. It's not trapped. Okay, that's all right if you know what that means. If you don't, doesn't matter. You probably don't need to. And then there's some more XML stuff. Okay, and here's our list of the authors that are involved with this. Okay, LaTeX team, I'm not sure why I put that in, but anyway, they can be in there if they like. Okay, the language, Great Britain English. Title, okay, more titles. Creation, modification dates, metadata dates, unique document IDs, all kinds of things. Converted, oh, okay, yeah, I know what's happened here, okay. But anyway, here's the conformance information, okay, and all the way through. Actually, this isn't actually the correct one, I don't think. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's okay. So we run this through, and now here's our document description, or the contents. Okay, article, div. Okay, these should all correspond to the tagging that's in here. So let's try and get those. Okay. Okay, so article, all right, so it's not going to behave. Let's bring that back up. Okay, the article, the div, the h1, the top matter date, end of that division, the my doc start, there's a figure, there's the TUG logo. Okay, all of this structure is captured in the XML. Okay, and if all this structure is nested correctly, the XML will be nested correctly. Okay. The hyperlinks, there's a link structure. So here's our link structure. Okay, it has a link object in it, which is internal for handling the PDF. Okay, but as it exports as a link with an href to where it's mapping to, so appropriate place within the document, and it's an xlink type, is a simple hyperlink. Okay, and as we go down, all nicely well formed, right? List labels, list bodies. It's all very, very, very clean, right? And it's almost as clean. Well, we tried to make the LaTeX source file pretty clean with those user-defined semantic tagging. Okay, you actually lose that aspect of it. So these, the Fifine and the Wi-Fi and the 4G and so on, since they were only tagging text, they weren't tagging structure, and so they didn't get exported as full structure in the XML, which is, well, I probably could have worked a bit harder and made it such that they would get extra tagging. That would have then made the XML look a little bit less neat, less compact. I think that's something that could have been done, and all the way through. Okay, so that's exporting to XML, and we get to the end. Okay, if anyone spots anything in there that they want to go back and ask about, that's fine. Okay, yeah.
Should mention that you are
the PDF documents, and so there's our XML export. Okay, if we go back and export to HTML web page, again, okay, takes a little bit of time, and here's our web page. Okay, so this is now locally on my drive, and everything comes out pretty nicely. Right, the pictures get rendered in, laid out pretty well, and Paolo can confirm whether or not we actually used one of these exports from the as the HTML. I certainly sent it to him. I think that's what we actually used.
It's on their website. It's what's on their website.
Yeah. So that's what we used, and that's how we got it. We got it from exporting from Acrobat of the fully tagged PDF document. Okay. So how are we going for time? I think we've taken up about an hour, haven't I?
You took 15 minutes into the next talk.
I've already 15 minutes. Oops.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry about that.
you have a good.
What do we
You have
want to
a,
do? Do we want to go through the questions or do we want to?
well, we have a question from Patrick Ion, which is very unique.
Okay, from
You,
Patrick Ion. Yeah.
does this provide a way of adding a tooltip message that would appear
Yes, of
on
course. Absolutely. Yes. Um, okay, I should have an example of that, but I'm not sure if it's at my fingertips. I think it was in here somewhere. There's a tool. There's tooltips. There's one piece of mathematics in here that's got a tooltip in it. It's a question of how easy I can find it. It's probably yeah. Oh, yeah. There it is. I think. Okay. I think I've passed it, past where it is. So maybe it's yes, right. So it's in the description of a method. So Walker's law. That's the way to find it. If I search for Walker's law, there it is. There it is. Okay. Here it is. There it is. And there's the tooltip. It's on page 16. Sorry, too much scrolling. It takes a while for it to. There we go. Tooltip. So Walker's law. Walker's law. Walker's value equals 0.01 times the human population times the distance to the population centre to the power of -2.5. Okay. So absolutely it gives you the way to do semantic tagging of mathematics. Well, okay, it's not, the package doesn't do it itself, but it has the ability to support that being done. So yes, we've looked at that kind of thing before and we've made sure that it's in there. Okay.
Ross, I would suggest you go quickly through the rest of because there are some other questions coming up.
Yeah, okay. So there's the first question here from Aman. What low-level package do you use for tagging? Well, it's TPDF. It's my own TPDF. Is it on CTAN? No, it's not on CTAN. And there's very good reasons for it not being on CTAN. Okay. What are the resources that tech macro package writers if they would want special tags around body of text, their macro typesets, whatever? Okay. The TPDF package represents a huge amount of work from myself, and it captures, in order to be able to know what to do and to know that you're doing the right thing, you need to be able to use something like Acrobat Pro. And the reason for that is not that you're not using Acrobat Pro to make anything, but you're using Acrobat Pro to tell you that you've actually done things correctly. Okay, so this is what we wanted to. We want to bring up the pre-flight checker. Okay, reports PDF syntax issues in the file. Is there anything wrong with the syntax? No, everything's correct. That's great. But it's very easy to make mistakes. If you make mistakes in the way you've written your macros, then you'll get mistakes in the PDF, and you need to know about it. And this will tell you. PDF verify compliance PDF UA. This is the one that is the most, probably the most important one at all, to know that you've actually got fully compliant PDF UA as your result, right? And you're not going to know that, well, because of the way tech has to handle putting stuff into the PDF, basically through specials. Somebody asked that kind of question in a talk yesterday. Yes, it's basically through specials or through PDF text, PDF object, primitive. Okay. Tech itself has no way of knowing how that structure fits together. It will show you, it will do the typesetting and create the visual view, and you can see that visual view, but that tells you nothing about if the tagging has been done correctly. If you don't check the tagging, you can be creating bad documents and sending them out to other people who may be relying on the tagging, and you haven't been able to confirm that in fact you've sent out a valid document. So if you can't use a validator like Acrobat Pro and understand its messages when it tells you that you've made a mistake, then you should not be using this package. And basically, I will not give this package to anybody or give access to the code for this package unless you can tell me that you're actually going to be creating valid documents and provably valid documents, right? And I think the LaTeX team agree with me on this, because we don't want to be sending out bad documents which seem to be claiming that they are valid for a particular PDF standard when in fact they are not. And that means you have to arm yourself with the right tools and get the skills to learn how to use them and to be able to make sure that you are creating valid documents. So that's why it's not on C10. Okay, that's basically the answer as to why is this stuff not on C10 yet. Hopefully in a couple of years' time, it will be able to be such that we can be so sure that everything is done correctly that it can go on C10, but until then it does not belong on C10. Okay, so that's the answer to that question. Okay.
So Rob, I was we hopelessly behind schedule. I mean, what about
sure. Well, why don't we wind this up and we can maybe talk about some more of it later. It's a pity for all those questions that aren't there. I hope.
No, but these questions I wanted to assure that you're going to come back to them, at least if you have the chat.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, look, I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff there in the chat, and there's questions and answers, and people seem to be answering for me. So, it's not so much the direct questions to me.
And we can continue in the interval.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly we can.
So please, Bill Heyman, Patrick Ion, Mary Man, stay.
Yeah, we'll have a look at that.
Stay at the interval, and we're gonna continue to discuss this issue a little bit further.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Right.
so no worries. So I'll be handing over to Thomas for the next.
Yes.